So we already know that Captain America has a future in the MCU. At least the name of Captain America will carry on through Sam Wilson the Falcon. But what happens to the original Captain America, Steve Rogers? Let's talk about this and some of the theories and ideas going forward. So by the time Avengers Endgame ended, we saw a huge shift for the MCU. Steve Rogers went back in time to the 70s and he lived the rest of his life with Agent Carter. Right there, he shows up at the end in 2023 and he gives Sam a shield. And we see he's an old man. Clearly he's been living, but he hasn't been fighting because, well, that would interfere with the timeline and set course of events. So naturally we can assume that going forward, Captain America Steve Rogers himself will probably have a minor role. Now, how exactly they involve him, if at all, remains to be seen. But if you look at the ending of Avengers Endgame, Bucky seemed very confident in letting Sam kind of walk there and get the idea and the full story of what exactly happened to Cap, right? What happened to Steve? Before this, we can assume there was some sort of conversation where Bucky knew what Steve was going to do because he's so accepting of everything that's about to happen. He knew Steve was not coming back. You can assume that in the upcoming Falcon and Winter Soldier TV series, they might play around with the idea of showing Steve Rogers, maybe mentoring Bucky, maybe telling him. So as much as I think Captain America Steve Rogers' story is over, I think we're going to fill in some of the missing dots there. And honestly, this would make a lot of sense. Kind of give us a little bit more, flesh out a little bit more on his decision, and have one of those flashbacks where Steve is talking to Bucky, so it fills in that void. So it's not just like, oh, he forgets about Bucky and this is it, and he gives it to Steve, right? I think a lot of people would be upset if that was the case, and certainly I think Bucky would be, but he's definitely not. So looking at the future, Steve's future is written in stone. During that giant, 50-year gap that he lived with Agent Carter, that all remains, but he never interfered. But that's not to say that he never reached out to Winter Soldier at some point and mentored him a little bit or had a conversation with him. And I think they'll fill in some of those gaps.